I'm Olivia Richardson, 35 years old. Just 3 years ago, when I needed my loved ones most, they vanished without a trace. Last Sunday, I was sipping coffee in the living room of the home I bought with my own money when the doorbell echoed through the halls. Standing there, uninvited and fully packed, was my entire extended family. After 3 years of pure silence, my brother Michael had the nerve to scan my living space and mutter, "You don't even have anyone to support. We'll move in." What I did next showed them the woman they once discarded no longer existed. Before I take you through this unbelievable roller coaster, tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. Tap subscribe if you've ever had to rise from being overlooked by those who should have lifted you. And stay till the very end to see exactly how I handled the people who assumed they could bulldoze back into my life and lay claim to everything I earned not my own. 3 years back, my world was nothing like today. Spent 5 full years at Market Trend Agency, pouring my energy into a role I was passionate about: marketing strategy. I had a modest apartment, dependable transportation, and what I foolishly believed was a nurturing family network. I wasn't rich, but I was proud. Proud of the steady, independent life I'd carved out. Then came the economic collapse. I'll never forget that awful day sitting shoulder to shoulder with coworkers in a cold conference room while the CEO regretfully explained that mass layoffs were inevitable. The pink slip felt like a punch to the gut. The payout, some measly weeks of compensation. Still, I thought I'd bounce back. With 90 days of savings and experience under my belt, I figured a new opportunity would pop up quickly. I couldn't have been more wrong. The entire field was hemorrhaging talent. Applications went unanswered. Rejection emails piled up. And with every passing week, my savings account shrank. Rent still needed to be paid. Groceries weren't free. And every unpaid bill felt like another crack in my carefully constructed world. Eventually, I picked up the phone, something I'd avoided until the last possible moment. I needed help. Just short-term assistance to keep me afloat while I looked for work. Surely the people I'd supported over the years would lend me a hand now, right? My first call was to my father, Richard. We'd never been close, but he had the means. I hoped that maybe, just maybe, he'd step up when it counted. "Dad, I'm in a tough spot right now," I began. "Would it be possible to get some temporary help with rent until you should have budgeted better?" he snapped. "Your generation always wants a bailout." Then he ended the call. Shaken, I called my mother, Diana, hoping for warmth, or at the very least, understanding. "Oh, honey, we're praying for you," she said sweetly. "But we really can't spare anything right now. Maybe stop buying those overpriced lattes." That sentence alone stung more than she realized. Then I reached out to my brother Michael, the same man I'd helped relocate multiple times. It's the one who'd borrowed money from me during his own rough patches. His reply: "Maybe if you didn't waste your paycheck on fancy apartments and expensive shoes, you wouldn't be in this mess. Some of us have families to support." Despite the shame I felt, I swallowed my pride and asked if we could meet at my parents' place to talk through options face to face. That dinner turned into the most degrading experience of my life. While I explained my struggles, my sister-in-law Rebecca rolled her eyes. "This is why people your age always end up broke," she scoffed, even though she was only 2 years older than me. My father constantly glanced at his wristwatch like he had more important things to do. My mother actually suggested I find a man to rescue me from my financial woes. And Michael, he delivered the final blow. "We've got real obligations, real children to take care of. You're just one person, you don't count." I drove back to my apartment, eyes blurred with tears, heart pounding. The next morning, a message from Michael appeared on my phone. "Don't contact us again until you've figured your life out. We can't keep cleaning up your messes." They had never helped me once. Not in college, not when I moved, not when I worked 2 jobs to keep my head above water. And now, when I needed them, they made me feel like a failure and a burden. As the days slipped by, I sold everything I could. The TV, my modest collection of jewelry, even my grandmother's heirloom silverware. None of it was enough. One morning, I walked out to find a notice plastered on my door, bold letters, official language, and a firm deadline. I had to vacate. The financial crisis had crushed the job market, and it crushed me right along with it. I still remember standing in my empty apartment, staring at the stack of unpaid bills. Rent, $1,350, car, $280 health insurance, $210 loan repayments, $375 each. Number felt like a countdown to collapse. Each day I logged into my bank account, watching the balance fall closer and closer to zero. 3 months without income had left me gasping for stability. And when I finally reached out, I was met with indifference, judgment, and cruelty. That was the moment everything inside me hardened. Not into bitterness, but resolve. That day marked a turning point. Each call I made peeled back the layers of illusion I'd held about kinship, loyalty, and unconditional care. My father, Richard, had always worn the badge of financial discipline like a badge of honor. Still, I believed that when real hardship knocked, he'd make room for empathy. When I phoned him, the faint hum of a golf commentator filtered through the receiver. As if the urgency in my voice was background noise to him. "Dad." "I wouldn't be reaching out unless I had to," I began, nerves tight. "I've been laid off. I'm in a bind. Could I borrow enough to cover next month's rent until you should have had an emergency fund?" He interrupted, tone clipped and emotionless. "Your generation always wants something for nothing. I worked 3 jobs at your age, never asked for a single penny from my folks." Before I could clarify or respond, the line went dead. My stomach dropped. He'd ended the call while I was still mid-sentence. It wasn't just a rejection. It was a severance of care. Still reeling, I reached out to my mother. Diana, her voice on the line was sticky sweet at first, that practiced tone she reserved for cocktail parties and shallow sympathies. But the moment she grasped what I was asking, her demeanor shifted. "Oh, honey, we're just praying everything works out for you," she said, syrupy and hollow. "But we just redid the kitchen and your father's club raised its annual dues again. Maybe try cutting out those lattes and trendy toast breakfasts." Had no idea I'd been brewing dollar store instant coffee and rationing canned soup. My days were filled with constant budgeting and sacrifice. There were no extras left to trim. In a last-ditch effort, I turned to Michael, my older brother. Just a few years earlier, I had lent him $2,000 when his company downsized, and he'd been between jobs. He hadn't even returned half of it, but I'd never pressed him. Family meant grace, or so I thought. Instead, he scoffed. "If you didn't waste your paycheck on overpriced rent and designer junk, maybe you'd have some cushion," he said. Never mind that my apartment was mid-tier and most of my clothes were clearance rack specials. "Some of us have responsibilities. I've got a family to feed, Olivia." Frustrated, cornered, and desperate, I swallowed what little pride I had. Leffen asked if we could all sit down over dinner at our parents' house. Maybe if they saw my face, the exhaustion in my eyes, the weight I was carrying, something would click. But that evening cemented my place as an outsider. The house smelled of her signature pot roast. As if this was just another Sunday meal. My father poured himself a scotch the moment I stepped inside. He didn't ask me how I was. He didn't offer a drink, just motioned to the kitchen where a pitcher of water sat. Michael and his wife Rebecca arrived fashionably late, their kids immediately vanishing into the basement. We gathered around the dining table, and I unfolded my story carefully, how the economic downturn had ravaged our industry, how my applications were going unanswered, how eviction loomed. My voice was steady, though my insides trembled. "I'm not asking for charity," I said. "Just a short-term loan. I'll repay every cent with interest. I just need to get through the next month or 2. Rebecca sighed so hard it might as well have been a theatrical performance. "This is exactly why millennials are a disaster," she scoffed, despite being barely 2 years older than me. "Michael and I keep an emergency fund, even with kids. That's called being prepared." I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to mention the hefty down payment gifted by her in-laws, the same luxury I'd never been granted. My father tapped his watch repeatedly, not once meeting my gaze. "Everyone faces tough seasons," he muttered. "It builds resilience." My mother reached over, patted my hand with just enough condescension to leave a bruise. Her diamond tennis bracelet sparkled under the chandelier. "Maybe it's time to find someone to share the load, darling. You remember that accountant you used to work with? He was cute and stable." But nothing hit as hard as Michael's words. I had just explained that if nothing changed, I might have to move cities. He leaned back in his chair and smirked. "We've got real obligations. Olivia, real families, mortgages, children, you. You just have yourself to deal with. That's not hardship. That's freedom." The rest of the dinner blurred. I couldn't recall what I said after that or whether I even touched my plate. I remember leaving in a daze, fumbling with my car keys, pulling over twice on the drive home just to steady my breathing. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold the steering wheel. The next morning, a text came through from Michael. "Don't reach out again until you've sorted your mess. It's embarrassing. We're not your safety net." They had never, in all my adult years, been a lifeline for me. Not once. The final days in my apartment passed in a haze of Craigslist listings and garage sales. I sold the flat screen. My jewelry box was emptied, even my grandmother's antique cutlery something. I'd sworn I'd never part with went to a pawn shop. I hosted weekend clearouts in the driveway, hoping to scrape together enough for one more rent payment, but it wasn't enough. Without support, without options, and without a miracle, I found the notice slapped on my door exactly 30 days. After that dinner, the paper was heavy, official, cold. Bold print informed me I had 72 hours to vacate the premises. I'd called home for 4 years. Reality hit hard. I wasn't someone reading a story about homelessness. I was now part of that story. I packed what I could into my beat-up Toyota Corolla. Boxes filled with my few remaining clothes, personal documents, and keepsakes sat stacked in the back seat. Every possession now lived with me in the front and trunk of my car. The girl who once had a cozy life, a routine, a belief in her family, that woman no longer existed. She had been pushed out of her home and her illusions by people who claimed to care. And I wasn't done falling yet. Among the few possessions I salvaged were essential garments, hygiene products, my aging laptop, and keepsakes too personal too. Part with letters from my grandmother, a photo album, and a bracelet from childhood. Everything else was boxed up and crammed into a storage facility. I could barely afford using the final bit of credit left on a near-maxed-out card. That storage key became both a lifeline and a reminder of what I had lost. The initial 2 weeks were a brutal education in staying invisible. I rotated through various parking lots at night, mostly large chain stores known to tolerate overnight vehicles. Each location came with its own risks and routines. I maintained my gym subscription, not for workouts, but because it offered access to clean showers and a place to brush my teeth without drawing attention. The locker room became my sanctuary. I mastered the art of washing my hair in public sinks and swapping outfits inside cramped stalls without letting any part of me touch the grimy floor. My daily schedule became an exercise in survival planning. I would stir before dawn, ensuring I moved before any employee could knock on my window. By 6 a.m., I was en route to the gym. After scrubbing myself presentable, dressed in slacks and blouses, I kept hanging from the car's ceiling handle, shielded by makeshift garment bags. From there, I headed to the public library, doors opening precisely at 9, where I set up camp with my laptop, applying to at least 15 roles each day, 20 if I pushed myself. I lived on non-perishables, granola, crackers, apples, and canned soup heated discreetly with borrowed microwaves. Evenings were the hardest. I reclined the driver's seat, draped my body with a single threadbare blanket, and tried to sleep amidst constant fears: theft, discovery, harassment. Each car that passed by sent my heart racing. Every night felt like a gamble. Yet what truly crushed me wasn't the discomfort. It wasn't the hunger or aching limbs. It was the overwhelming humiliation, the sinking weight of invisibility, the realization that I had no safety net, not a soul willing to extend a hand. Shame curled around me like smoke. Then came the unexpected spark of change. I was tucked into a quiet corner of the library, halfway through submitting my 20th resume for the week, when a gentle tap on my shoulder pulled me from the screen. Turning around, I saw a familiar face, Marcus Johnson. Formerly from the creative division at Market Trend, his presence hit me like a wave of memory. Back then, we'd shared brainstorming sessions and office birthday cakes. Olivia. I thought, that was you, he said, a warmth in his voice that instantly cracked my guarded facade. His smile momentarily transported me to better times. I hesitated, still looking for the right fit. I answered carefully, masking the chaos beneath my calm exterior. Marcus sat beside me, ignoring the librarian's glare. I've started a consulting firm, small, still finding its footing. It's just me and a couple of folks from our old department. We really need someone like you. I can't offer anything close to what we used to make, though. It was more than I dared hope for. Anything was better than my current balance of zero. I'd love to talk more, I replied, trying not to sound too eager. We moved to a nearby coffee shop. Over warm mugs, he walked me through his business model. Offer on the table was part-time, minimal pay, but flexible and remote-friendly. A ladder back into my field. When can I start? I asked, no hesitation, no negotiation. I wasn't bargaining, I was surviving with that first paycheck. I found a micro studio in a neighborhood that most would avoid after dusk. The building's buzzer rarely worked, the plumbing was temperamental, and noise poured in through thin walls from neighbors constantly arguing or blasting music. But it had a locking door and walls of my own. Compared to sleeping in a car, it felt like luxury. Still, one job wasn't enough. So I looked for evening work and landed a spot at the Rusty Nail, dimly lit bar with worn leather stools and a rowdy clientele. Tony, the owner, a gruff man with a hidden heart of gold, hired me despite my lack of experience. He tossed me an apron and told me to learn fast, and I did. I learned how to pour drinks, break up arguments, charm customers, and work till 2 a.m., all while smiling through fatigue. My days started at 7. I'd work with Marcus until early evening, rush to the bar to change clothes, and serve cocktails until closing. Then I'd stumble home, crash for a few hours, and begin the cycle. Anew, I was averaging 70 hours a week. My feet ached constantly. My back throbbed, and some nights I cried just from pure exhaustion. That's when Stephanie Chin entered my life, a law student who worked weekends at the bar to cover tuition and rent. We bonded instantly over mutual misery, sarcasm, and late-night pizza. When she mentioned needing to move, I suggested we team up and split costs. A month later, we shared a 2-bedroom flat with slanted floors, drafty windows, and a working stove that squealed when turned on. But it felt like progress. For the first time since being laid off, I wasn't fighting alone, with Stephanie splitting expenses. I could afford basic health care, again a no-frills policy, but one that meant I no longer had to fear getting sick. And that relief was indescribable. Meanwhile, at Marcus's consultancy, I was determined to prove my worth. I stayed late to master new digital tools, tackled the unglamorous assignments, and suggested strategies that revived stagnant projects. Slowly, my confidence began to return. 6 months in, Marcus called me into his office. "You've changed the game around here," he said, eyes sincere. "We're expanding, and I want you to take on more hours and more responsibility. You're the engine behind our growth." Those words carried more than just professional recognition. They restored something I hadn't realized was broken. A belief in myself during countless nights when exhaustion should have pulled me into sleep, but instead left me wide-eyed beneath the ceiling fan's slow rotation. I turned to self-education. I scoured free resources, webinars, tutorials, open courses eager to fortify myself with every bit of knowledge I could grasp. I dove into subjects like SEO optimization, performance analytics, email campaign strategy. It's tools I'd once barely touched became second nature. Each certification earned was like another plank in the bridge out of despair. The strangest shift happened gradually one quiet evening. I realized I had made it through the entire day without replaying the betrayal. That had hollowed out my trust. Wasn't healing, not entirely, but it was distance, space between then and now. Proof that their indifference no longer consumed my every waking hour. One evening, after a particularly taxing double shift, I collapsed onto my mattress without opening my bank app. I didn't calculate bills or panic over rent. I didn't run through mental checklists of how many more weeks I'd need to bartend. I simply closed my eyes. For the first time in a long while, no tears fell. That moment, while small to some, felt monumental to me. 12 months had passed since the dinner that shattered my illusion of family. That Tuesday morning, I didn't commemorate the date with candles or bitterness. I had a presentation to prepare for a new account at Horizon Marketing. Marcus had officially branded our venture. While sipping coffee before dawn, I paused for a breath of reflection. A year earlier, my car had doubled as a bed. Now, I was leading the client acquisition team. Not the path I envisioned, but considering where I'd started, it felt like standing at the summit. With the promotion came a meaningful increase in salary. It wasn't quite my previous income, but it was enough to submit my resignation at the Rusty Nail. Stephanie, half joking and half heartbroken, declared she'd miss having me as her co-bartender. But seriously, she said, clinking our mismatched glasses filled with discount wine, no one earned this more than you. Our upgraded budget meant we could finally escape the chaos of our old building. The new place was cleaner, quieter, with appliances that worked and neighbors who didn't scream through the walls at ungodly hours. My evenings, once spent pouring drinks and scrubbing counters, now opened up for true progress. I registered for night courses at the community college, expanding my expertise in analytics, content optimization, campaign development. Everything I absorbed made me sharper, more competitive, more valuable. Despite professional momentum, my personal life remained cautiously guarded. Stephanie tried to nudge me into dating again. I agreed, more to appease her than from genuine interest. A few coffee dates here, a brunch meet there. But each attempt hit the same invisible wall. Eventually, the question would come. What? About your parents, your brother? I'd answer vaguely, we're not close, which only sparked more curiosity. When I offered a carefully edited version of the truth, I'd watch their faces shift. Some grew uncomfortable. Others insisted I reconcile while I still could. One man had the nerve to suggest the estrangement was likely mutual fault. That was our last interaction. Then came the campaign that redefined everything. At Horizon, we had submitted a nonprofit project I led to a regional marketing competition. The budget had been microscopic, the stakes high, and I'd poured my creativity into every frame. To my astonishment, Marcus's unfiltered joy. We won Best Cause Campaign of the Year at the awards gala. Marcus insisted I accept the trophy. On behalf of the team, as I stepped onto that stage, the sight of rows filled with industry professionals, some of whom I had once shared cubicles and coffee breaks with, made my hands tremble. But my voice remained steady. This honor belongs to the entire Horizon family, I said, gripping the microphone, and to anyone who's ever been given a second chance. After the applause faded and glasses clinked in celebration, a sharply dressed man approached. That campaign, absolutely genius, he said, offering a handshake. I'm Nathan Taylor, Regional Director at Midstate Bank. We talked about creative strategies, ROI metrics, brand authenticity. Hours slipped by unnoticed. Unlike the dates that fizzled, Nathan asked insightful questions, never dominating the conversation, never pushing too far. Eventually, he asked the inevitable, "What about your family?" My throat tightened. "It's complicated," I replied, bracing for the usual awkward pause. He nodded. "I get it. My parents took off when I was 7. My grandparents raised me. Blood doesn't define loyalty." In that instant, something shifted. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to justify the scars on my heart. We exchanged numbers. And over the following weeks, he became someone I could talk to not just about work, but about fears, dreams, the things I hadn't admitted to anyone else. We weren't rushing. We were learning each other slowly, honestly. Back at home, Stephanie had begun to notice something different in me, something weightier than fatigue or stress. One night, over takeout, she placed her chopsticks down and said gently, "You've repaired your career, your finances, even your confidence. But what about the emotional wreckage your family left behind?" I didn't have an answer. I'd buried the pain beneath busyness. At her urging, I began therapy covered, thankfully, by my improved insurance plan. The first sessions were brutal. Naming the wounds, reliving the rejections, letting myself feel what I had tried so hard to suppress. But week by week, I peeled back layers I hadn't even known were there. And then came a moment's session. 6. My therapist, compassionate but direct, said something I would carry with me forever. The way your family responded in crisis speaks more about them than it ever did about you. You created something out of nothing. That's not failure. That's power. Her words landed with force. Validation I hadn't even realized I still craved as the 2-year milestone approached. Horizon Marketing Solutions had blossomed into a thriving agency with 15 team members and a bustling client roster. I had risen to a senior leadership role, earning another well-deserved raise along the way. Marcus, once merely a supervisor, had become both a professional guide and a trusted confidant. Our headquarters shifted to a sleek downtown suite, reflecting the company's evolution and growing credibility among regional businesses, with money no longer a daily concern. I began to entertain a dream that once felt entirely unreachable: homeownership. The thought of securing a permanent place, one immune to landlord notices or eviction letters, stirred something deep inside me: stability, autonomy, a sanctuary that belonged to me alone. The search proved more emotional than anticipated. The first listing I visited looked pristine on the surface, but a closer inspection revealed structural nightmares concealed beneath cosmetic upgrades. The second was located in a rapidly declining neighborhood where I didn't feel safe even in daylight. The third had every feature I hoped for: natural light, cozy charm, great location, but a cash buyer swooped in before I could submit an offer. Each disappointment stung, testing my resolve for fleeting moments. I wondered if perhaps I wasn't ready after all, but then I found it. A quaint 3-bedroom bungalow nestled in a quiet suburb. It had character-original hardwood floors, a small patch of grass begging for flower beds, and a porch swing that creaked softly in the breeze. Though outdated in some areas, the bones were strong. The instant I stepped inside, I pictured morning coffee in the sunroom and evenings curled up by the fireplace. It didn't sparkle, but it felt like home. Navigating the mortgage process brought a mix of anxiety and cautious hope. Despite my steady income and rebuilt credit score, the loan officer scrutinized every detail of my financial history. Years of struggle left shadows in my records, but numbers only tell part of the story. Persistence told the rest. In the end, my documentation earning savings and clean credit won their approval, sitting in that office, signing stack after stack of paperwork. I was overwhelmed by a sense of triumph. No financial help, no parental support, no co-signer. Just me and the career I had clawed back from ruin. The notary's final stamp sealed. ownership was mine. Moving day arrived with more emotion than expected. Stephanie took the morning off to help load boxes. Nathan handled the logistics like a seasoned project manager. Marcus showed up early, driving a rental truck himself, accompanied by 3 colleagues bearing coffee and muffins. We hauled furniture, unpacked kitchenware, and celebrated with greasy pizza and budget-friendly bubbly sprawled across the living room floor. To Olivia, Nathan toasted, raising a plastic cup. Proof that believing in yourself is more than enough. 2 weeks later, I hosted my first official gathering, a modest housewarming. The furniture situation was far from complete. A plush mattress in the bedroom, a reliable sofa in the living room, and little else. But the space was mine, and I was proud to open it to those who had stood by me. Colleagues, friends, neighbors, and even Tony from the Rusty Nail dropped by. Laughter echoed off bare walls, filling the home with life. My biological relatives remained notably absent. I had seen glimpses of them on social media. Michael's vacation photos, Diana's post about a charity auction, Richard's appearance in a local golf tournament. I even noticed that my mother had liked a shared photo of me receiving an industry accolade. But not one of them reached out. Oddly, their silence didn't pierce me anymore. The ache they'd left behind still flared occasionally, like a healed scar that stings in the cold, but it no longer governs my emotional landscape. I had proven to myself that their desertion hadn't destroyed me. What I couldn't have predicted was how soon they'd test weather. I was ready for their reappearance. Sunday mornings in my new place had evolved into sacred rituals. No alarms, no obligations. I'd wake slowly, brew rich dark coffee in my newly painted kitchen, and step onto the wooden deck at the back of the house. Wrapped in a soft robe, I'd sip my drink while watching birds flutter around the feeder I had installed. These quiet moments were my sanctuary, proof that every hardship had been worth enduring. That Sunday started just like the rest. The breeze carried the scent of early spring. The coffee was hot, my book enthralling. I had barely made it 2 pages. And when the jarring ring of the doorbell shattered the calm, second later, heavy knocking followed, persistent, growing in urgency. I considered ignoring it. Sundays were mine alone, and I hadn't ordered anything. But the interruption refused to cease. With a weary sigh, I placed my coffee down and made my way to the front door. Opening it was like stepping into a surreal tableau. Standing there, awkwardly packed together on my welcome mat, were the people who had left me to drown when I needed them most. My father, Richard, arms crossed and eyes already surveying the entryway. My mother, Diana, holding her oversized handbag like a trophy. My brother, Michael, expression unreadable. Rebecca, as disapproving as ever, flanked by their 2 children, Emma and Jacob. Their suitcases, 4 in total, stood lined up like a makeshift barricade. Duffel bags, backpacks, and a stroller completed the picture. "Surprise!" my mother sang out, her voice an octave too high, arms stretched wide for a hug that I didn't move to return. "Oh, sweetheart, look at you. You look exhausted. Are you getting enough rest?" Before I could respond, my father leaned forward, trying to peer past me into the house. I gave a tight, terse nod, like a man inspecting a property he intended to purchase. "Lovely neighborhood, peaceful, great." "For resale," my father remarked, scanning the street like he was appraising a property portfolio. Michael gave his children a gentle push forward. "Go on, say hi to your Aunt Olivia. You remember her, don't you?" Emma offered a trained grin, her expression one of polite detachment. Jacob simply stared, curiosity on his face, but not a trace of recognition. Rebecca stood slightly off to the side, already recording a video of my front steps and the entrance, her phone angled to capture the interior beyond me. "What a cute little spot," she commented with deliberate inflection, drawing out little just enough to deliver the intended sting. "Very snug." I stood motionless, fingers curled tightly around the doorframe. 3 years of silence shattered, not by a text, not even a courtesy call, but by an ambush on my porch, complete with baggage suggesting an extended visit. "May we come in?" my mother asked, inching closer. "It's brisk out here, and we've been on the road since early morning. On instinct, more than intent." I stepped aside. They flowed past me as if returning from a brief absence rather than a prolonged exile. Richard immediately began pacing the living area, tapping on walls, inspecting trim, muttering observations under his breath. Diana made a beeline for the kitchen, her voice carrying as she critiqued my cabinet color. Rebecca continued filming without pause, just grabbing a few clips for the family group chat. "Everyone's dying to see how well you've done." Michael's kids didn't need encouragement. They bolted up the stairs, slamming doors and yanking open drawers, treating my home like an indoor playground. I followed quickly, heart-pounding Dot upstairs. I found Emma bouncing on my neatly arranged bed, completely at ease. "Could you please stop?" I asked, keeping my tone even. "That's where I sleep. Mom says this'll be my room," she replied, still jumping. "I get the bed because I'm older. Jacob has to sleep on the floor." I blinked. "Excuse me?" Before I could say more, Jacob's voice rang from my office across the hall. "This one's gonna be my game room." I rushed over to find him pulling books from shelves, already reorganizing the space. Guiding both of them downstairs, I returned to find the adults comfortably settled. Diana had taken the prime spot on the sofa. Richard was sipping from a mug he'd apparently helped himself to. Michael stood near the wall, eyeing my award certificate. "Still in marketing, huh?" "Huh?" he said, as if we'd parted last week. "Figures you'd stay in that lane. Brings in a paycheck." "Why are you here?" I asked finally, unable to cushion the question. They all hesitated. Diana recovered first, layering her words with artificial warmth. "Family's visit. We've missed you so much. After seeing your posts about this place, we thought, why not come see for ourselves?" I stared, after ignoring me for 3 full years. Another silence settled like fog in the room. Rebecca rose, smoothing her blouse. "I'll go whip something up for lunch," she said cheerfully, making her way to the kitchen and opening the refrigerator without so much as a glance in my direction. Not much in here. Some greens and yogurt. Don't you keep snacks on hand for company?" Michael coughed awkwardly. "Look, Olivia, things haven't been easy on our end either," Richard added. "The stock market's been volatile. Took a hit on my portfolio. Retirement funds hurting." Diana reached toward me. I pulled back instinctively. "We've all been under pressure," she said, her voice soft but calculated. "Michael's had the roughest time of all." Michael shifted uncomfortably. "Got laid off half a year ago. Downsizing? The timing couldn't have been worse." Rebecca, now returning from the kitchen, chimed in. "We were scraping by on what little we had. I'm working part-time, but the landlord raised the rent again, and we couldn't renew." Emma, who had been inspecting my living room decor, blurted, "Daddy says we're moving in with Aunt Olivia because she has lots of space and no kids." A beat past eyes darted around the room. Clearly, this wasn't how they intended the news to drop. "We're not officially moving in," Diana said quickly, glancing pointedly at Emma. "We're exploring all options. Families support each other. That's what it means to be a family." The irony hung in the air like smoke. The last time I had asked for help, they'd treated me like a burden. Now, their tone was that of entitlement. As if to drive the point home, Jacob came bounding into the room. "There's a huge empty spot downstairs. Can I have that one? It's bigger." Rebecca chuckled lightly as if her son hadn't just laid claim to my basement. "Kids, they get so excited over new spaces. Why don't you check out the yard?" I suggested, guiding the children toward the back door. "There's a tree I think you'll like." Once they were outside, Richard leaned forward, folding his hands. "We should talk about the practicalities of this setup. What's your annual tax bill like? Any neighborhood association dues we should be aware of?" "Kay," my father asked casually, as though we were in the middle of negotiating a property share. Arrangement. I echoed the word, surprised by how foreign it sounded coming from me. Well, yes. My mother interjected quickly, her tone overly cheerful. We're family, and that extra bedroom upstairs is ideal for the children. They're used to bunking together. The implication was unmistakable. This wasn't a casual drop-in. It was a reconnaissance trip masked as a visit. I stood abruptly. I need to step out and make a phone call, I said, more to gather my thoughts than to actually dial anyone. Feel free to settle in, but please ask before exploring any more rooms. As I stepped onto the porch and gently shut the door behind me, I could hear Rebecca discussing new furniture arrangements. Through the window, my father was inspecting kitchen fixtures like a home inspector, opening and closing drawers as if evaluating quality. I inhaled the cool spring air, so different from the calm morning breeze I'd enjoyed just hours earlier. The people who had deserted me at my lowest point had arrived with luggage, expectations, and no warning. And somehow, I was the one feeling displaced in the house I had bought and maintained alone. By late afternoon, any illusion of this being a short visit had completely evaporated. My mother had claimed control of the kitchen, criticizing my limited grocery stock while preparing a dinner I hadn't invited them to eat. My father reset my thermostat, muttering about wasteful energy habits. The kids had tracked dirt across the floors, and Rebecca had rearranged my decor to suit her own taste, citing childproofing as her excuse. A text lit up my screen. Nathan, still on for dinner tonight? I'm excited to try that new pasta place. I had completely forgotten our plans. With a sudden sense of urgency, I replied, "Family emergency. Can you come over instead?" "I need backup," he answered almost immediately. "Heading there now. Want me to bring anything?" "Just yourself," I wrote back, grateful beyond words. When Nathan arrived about an hour later, the air inside was thick with unspoken tension. I introduced him, watching closely as my mother's eyes lit up with unspoken matchmaking hopes, while my father shifted straight into interrogation mode. "What do you do for a living?" Richard asked, scanning Nathan like a resume. "Is your field stable? Any long-term benefits? Property assets? Matching retirement contributions?" Nathan smiled with grace, answering respectfully while never straying far from my side. Once dinner was announced, we awkwardly moved into the dining area where my mother had rearranged everything. My own dishes positioned in a way I'd never have chosen. With only 6 chairs, I had to pull out a dusty, folding one from the basement for myself. Rebecca spent the beginning of the meal snapping pictures of the spread, angling for the best lighting. My father declared the chicken overcooked before taking a second bite. Then Michael cleared his throat. "So, Olivia, we've actually given notice at our apartment," he said, delivering the statement like a business update. "The landlord's only giving us a couple weeks." I lowered my fork. "Sorry to hear that. Have you found a new place?" The room went still. My mother began refilling glasses unnecessarily. My father became engrossed in the pattern on his plate. "Well," Michael began again, glancing at Rebecca, "rents have skyrocketed and job postings are scarce. We thought since you've got all this space and it's just you—" "This place isn't exactly huge," I interrupted. 3 bedrooms, one's my workspace. The kids are fine with sharing," Rebecca jumped in. "And the office could easily be turned back into a bedroom. You can work from anywhere. Dining tables work just fine." Diana reached across the table, gently patting my hand. "Just for a little while, sweetheart. Maybe 6 months. A year at most until Michael lands something permanent. A year." I repeated slowly, trying to keep my composure. "Well, we should be realistic," my father said with firm finality. "Good roles don't appear overnight." Emma, oblivious to the adult's discomfort, added brightly, "Daddy said we're staying here forever 'cause Aunt Olivia has too much room for one person." Michael sent her a glare. "Not forever, honey. Just until things improve." That's when the second revelation dropped. "We've also had to make some decisions," my father said, his tone bordering on nonchalant. "With the market downturn, our finances needed adjusting. We sold the house, my mother added with forced solemnity. What? I asked, stunned. That home had been in our family for 3 decades. Closed the deal last week, Richard continued, as if reporting the weather. Decent payout, but the new condo won't be ready for another 6 months, at least. The silence in the room was deafening. So we'll need somewhere to stay in the meantime, my father stated. Here, I said flatly. The puzzle now fully assembled in my mind. Well, naturally, Diana answered, sounding almost offended by the question. We're family, and you've got all this space, Richard chimed in. You could take the basement. It's finished. There's even that tiny bathroom. With a little decorating, it could be cozy. You want me to relocate to the basement? I repeated slowly, trying to grasp the audacity of the suggestion. So you can claim my bedroom. It just makes practical sense, Rebecca chimed in smoothly, as if it were a logical favor. The master suite has an attached bath deal for Richard and Diana. Michael and I can take the guest room. And the children can share the third. You'd still have privacy downstairs. Beneath the table, Nathan slid his hand over mine, a subtle act of reassurance that kept me from erupting. Then Michael delivered the sentence that shattered any remaining illusion of familial respect. It's not like you've got a family to think about, he said bluntly. No husband, no kids, just you. We've got real obligations. Words echoed in the silence that followed. Even my mother, who had championed this ridiculous scheme, looked momentarily uncomfortable. But Michael kept going, oblivious or simply indifferent. I mean, come on, be realistic. You owe us. We raised you, paid for school. It's your turn to support the family. Before I could reply, my phone lit up. Aunt Margaret, grateful for the escape, I excused myself and stepped into the kitchen. Hi, Aunt Margaret. Sweetheart, guest had to call, and thank you directly. Your dad told me about your amazing gesture, taking in the whole gang during these tough times. What a generous soul you are. I leaned against the counter for stability. He told you that, did he? Oh, yes, she chirped. Called this morning and filled us all in. You're such a role model. Even Jeffrey said it restored his faith in your generation. Oh, and since you're all under one roof now, we're thinking summer's perfect for a family reunion. Doesn't your backyard have space for a big tent? I ended the call as politely as I could, my knuckles pale from gripping the phone. When I returned to the dining room, the conversation had shifted now, revolving around which of my possessions should be replaced to better accommodate their lifestyle. This sofa won't do, Rebecca was saying. Too delicate for children. Our sectional is way more functional for gatherings. And this dining table's too small, Diana added. We'll need seating for at least 10. We can bring ours, it's expandable. We'll also bring our king bed, my father said, matter-of-factly. That queen you've got upstairs is cramped. I stood in the doorway, barely able to process the invasion happening before my eyes. These were the same people who had left me alone, sleeping, in a freezing car 3 years ago, and now they were planning to append the sanctuary I had built, treating it like communal space. Michael noticed me standing there and mistook my silence for approval. Oh, and we'll need duplicates of your house keys. We're going to start moving things in tomorrow while you're at work. Nathan reached for my hand again, anchoring me as the room blurred. My relatives who had vanished when I needed them most now presumed they had the right to take over the life I had painstakingly rebuilt. They saw no issue with it. To them, this was just how family operated. Show up when convenient, claim whatever space or resource suited their needs, ignore boundaries, and expect gratitude in return. They didn't see this house as mine. They saw it as a shared asset, a resource waiting to be redistributed in their favor. I was supposed to surrender my freedom, my privacy, my security because family sticks together. The same family that had shut the door on me when I was penniless and desperate now felt entitled to the fruits of my grit. I need time to think, I said finally, my voice steadier than my pulse. It's late, and this is a lot. My mother's expression darkened. A hotel. But we've been on the road all day. We assumed I'm not set up for overnight guests. I interrupted. And I have an early meeting. I need rest. There were immediate protests, mainly from my parents, who muttered about unnecessary costs, but eventually they agreed to leave. My father asked about affordable hotels in the area, making sure to imply I should be footing the bill. I suggested a moderately priced inn 5 miles away and avoided acknowledging his suggestion. They packed up reluctantly, though they left, behind 2 bulky suitcases in my hallway under the guise of saving space in the car. Just as I started to close the front door behind them, Michael lingered. "Let's be sensible, Livia," Michael said calmly, as though he were offering a compromise rather than issuing a demand. "This setup works for everyone. You've got the square footage. We're in need. That's what families do, right?" I gave a silent nod, unwilling to speak. If I opened my mouth, years of buried anguish might erupt in a torrent I couldn't contain. Nathan guided them toward the door, offering quiet stability while they gathered their remaining things. They promised to return in the morning, eager to continue the discussion. The moment their vehicle turned the corner, I collapsed onto my couch, the entire weight of the day crashing into me like a tidal wave. Nathan sat beside me, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. "You all right?" he asked gently, his concern etched into every word. "Not even close," I whispered. "Did that actually happen? Did my estranged relatives really appear unannounced after disappearing for 3 years? An attempt to seize control of my house?" He nodded solemnly. "They did, and they acted like it was perfectly natural." My hands trembled as I reached for my phone. It took 2 failed attempts before I successfully called Stephanie. "Emergency," I said as soon as she answered. "Can you get over here? Give me 20 minutes. She replied, not even hesitating. "What happened?" By the time she and Marcus arrived, I'd barely begun to process everything. They rushed in, wrapping me in the kind of warmth and immediacy my blood relatives had never provided. I walked them through the entire surreal timeline, beginning with the unexpected doorbell and ending with the plan to evict me from my own bedroom. "They told you to relocate to the basement," Stephanie echoed, her jaw dropping. "In the house you bought?" Marcus crossed his arms. "And after how they treated you, they just assumed you'd roll out the red carpet." "It's worse than that," I said, bitterness rising in my throat. "They've already spread the word. My aunt called earlier, thanking me for opening my doors. Apparently, my father's been broadcasting the news across the extended family like it's a done deal." Nathan leaned forward. "You need to be ready for them to return tomorrow. They're coming back with expectations. They won't handle rejection well." Stephanie nodded. "You'll need a structured response and documentation. If they're misrepresenting your involvement to others, who knows what else they'll invent." Marcus pulled out his phone. "I know someone who might help, a financial consultant who specializes in navigating family-related economic pressure. I'll call her now." We stayed up well past midnight, devising a clear plan. Stephanie reminded me that in our state, I could legally record conversations with only one-party consent. Nathan researched occupancy laws, warning me that even a short stay could complicate things legally if they attempted to establish residency. Marcus reached his advisor, who promised to be available for a consultation within the week. When my friends finally left, promising to be on standby the next day, I wandered my quiet home in solitude. I moved through each room slowly, running my hands along the furniture I had selected with care. Staring at the framed photos of milestones I had fought to achieve, I recalled the countless nights I'd spent alone in that freezing car, behind a discount store, pretending to the world that I still had it together. I remembered the sting of using a public gym just to maintain some semblance of cleanliness. Dialing into interviews from borrowed Wi-Fi in the corner of a crowded library, each milestone was carved into my memory. My first paycheck from Horizon, the tiny studio apartment that finally gave me a door to lock, the promotion that validated my skills, the industry award that no one in my family acknowledged, and the nerve-wracking process of signing a mortgage solo. Every accomplishment had been born from effort, Not 1 ounce of support, not a single dime, had come from the people now seeking to dismantle the world I had built. Sleep remained elusive that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a fresh notepad and began documenting every cruel detail I could recall. I printed archived text messages, especially the final one from Michael, where he told me not to reach out until I'd sorted my life out. I transcribed lines spoken at that awful dinner years ago, capturing the sharpness of their dismissals word for word, dot by sunrise. I had made my decision. I sent a text to my family. Let's meet at noon to discuss logistics. Their replies came quickly. My mother responded with gratitude and a smiling emoji, adding that they'd bring measuring tape for planning furniture arrangements. I spent the morning fortifying my home. Sentimental items were moved to my bedroom, which I locked, activated. A discreet audio recording setup on my laptop. I brewed a small pot of coffee but left the kitchen otherwise untouched. There would be no snacks, no lunch spread, no gesture of hospitality. This would not be a friendly chat. At 11:45, Nathan messaged that he, Stephanie, and Marcus were parked down the street, ready to intervene if needed. Knowing they were close was the final surge of confidence I needed. At precisely noon, my relatives arrived with even more bags, 2 large boxes labeled kitchen and linens, and the kind of unearned assurance only entitlement could breed. My father was already directing Michael to set the boxes in the hallway like the space belonged to them before anything else. I said evenly, standing tall, "We need to sit down for a serious discussion." Confusion flickered across their faces, but they complied, settling themselves on the couch and chairs like guests expecting welcome. The children were ushered into the backyard while Rebecca remained by the window, half watching them, half scanning the room for furniture placement. I didn't sit. Instead, I remained standing, rooted by the awareness that I wasn't alone, that my real family was close by, ready to defend what I had built. 3 years ago, it began. I was laid off without warning. When I realized I was drowning financially, I reached out to each of you, hoping naively that family might mean support. My mother shifted in her seat, visibly uncomfortable. My father glanced at his watch, avoiding eye contact. "Dad," I said firmly, locking eyes with him when I called you. Your exact words were, "Maybe you should have managed your money better." Your generation expects everything handed to them. Then you ended the call. His expression tensed, but he said nothing. "Mom," I turned to her. "You responded with prayers, then suggested I stop wasting money on coffee while I was already surviving on instant noodles and tap water." She looked down at her hands, speechless. "And you," I pivoted toward Michael. "When I asked for assistance, you scoffed that I had no one to blame but myself for choosing a designer lifestyle over security. Never mind that I lent you $2,000 2 years earlier, cash you conveniently never returned." Michael's mouth opened, but I raised my hand before he could speak. "And when I joined you for dinner to request a small loan so I wouldn't be forced onto the street," I continued, addressing my parents, "you acted like I was some cautionary tale. Rebecca called me a reckless cliché. Mom, you said I should marry someone wealthy instead of chasing careers. Michael, your words were, we've got real lives, real families. You're just one person." I crossed the room, picked up my phone, and opened an archived text. The next morning I said, Michael sent this. "Don't reach out again until you've sorted yourself out. We can't keep cleaning up your messes. It's embarrassing." Not one of them objected. Silence saturated the room. After that, I said softly, I was evicted. I slept in my car for 2 weeks. I showered at a gym and used public Wi-Fi. To apply for jobs, none of you called. No one offered shelter. Not a single meal. I was invisible to you. My mother's eyes brimmed, but I couldn't tell if it was guilt or discomfort. I started over from nothing. Worked double shifts, took evening classes. Lived in a shoebox until I could afford this place. I built this home from grit. Every part of it came from effort, my effort. I looked around at their stunned faces, and now, after ignoring me for years, you show up uninvited, expecting to occupy my house. You want me to vacate my room so you can play house in my space? Father cleared his throat. The past is done, Olivia. Families forgive. We move forward. No, I replied coldly. You don't get to define what families should do. Families don't vanish during crisis. They don't respond to desperation with mockery. You didn't just fail, you chose to abandon me. I inhaled deeply before continuing. You won't be moving into my house. Their expressions twisted from confusion to disbelief. But what are we supposed to do? Michael stammered, visibly shocked by my refusal. I've arranged a meeting with a professional, I said, handing him a card. A financial expert who helps people facing tough circumstances. She'll explain your options: government aid, housing grants, job placement services. My father sprang to his feet, face reddening. This is how you repay us. After everything we've done. I stood my ground. What have you done for me lately? The only thing I remember is being cast out when I needed you most. Tears, now, rolled down my mother's cheeks. But we're family, she whispered, as if that absolved the past. Family isn't just biology, I answered, calm but unwavering. It's who shows up. It's loyalty, and I've found that with others. Real loyalty. Real love. As if the universe heard my words, the doorbell rang. I walked over and opened it. Nathan, Stephanie, and Marcus stood outside, punctual and strong. The embodiment of true belonging. These are the ones who showed up when you vanished. I said, stepping aside as they entered. The people who encouraged me, supported me, and celebrated with me. They are my family. Michael's jaw clenched. You'll regret this. I'll make sure every relative hears about how you turned your back on your own blood. Go ahead, I replied. Be sure to include the part where you disowned me first, where you watched me struggle and looked away, where you came back only when there was something to gain. My eyes landed on the entry table. Resting there was a Kimai, emergency spare, the one I had given Mom when I bought the house. My father had placed it there earlier, maybe intending to use it later. I reached down, picked it up, and held out my palm. I'll need this returned. After a beat of silence, my father retrieved the key from his pocket and dropped it in too. My open palm, the sound of metal against skin felt like the severing of an old chain. Thank you, I said, voice steady. Now, I'd like you to gather your belongings and vacate my home. You're welcome to contact the financial advisor if you wish, but resolving your situation is not my burden to carry. The following 30 minutes unfolded like a painfully slow unraveling. The air was thick with unspoken words and lingering. Resentment? They shuffled about, collecting boxes and bags, moving through my house like ghosts retreating from a battlefield. My father grumbled under his breath about ungrateful children, his tone bitter and accusatory. My mother oscillated between pleading for reconsideration and sighing heavily in hopes. I'd be moved by guilt. Michael didn't speak at all. His silence roared louder than any insult, as he silently herded his kids toward their SUV with a clenched jaw and furious eyes. Rebecca, ever the realist, waited until no one was watching before slipping the business card into her purse perhaps. Her only act of quiet wisdom that day, as their vehicle disappeared down the road. Stephanie gently draped an arm over my shoulder. You doing okay? I took a slow, deliberate breath. A strange cocktail of sorrow and release settled in my chest. I think I will be, I said honestly. Maybe for the first time, I actually believe that. The broken girl they had discarded would have begged them to stay? The woman I had become watched them leave with her head held high. But peace did not come instantly. In the days that followed, I discovered that standing your ground doesn't always mean the battle is over. My phone became a new front line. Flooded with missed calls and volatile messages, my father's voicemails bounced between fury. You'll regret this for the rest of your life? and pitiful negotiation. We could contribute a bit toward rent, maybe after a few months. My mother, never one for subtlety, left me weepy messages about her broken heart and sleepless nights. Lamenting her cold, unfeeling daughter, Michael, resorted to digital warfare passive-aggressive posts on social media full of cryptic bitterness about betrayal, lost family values, and self-centered relatives, carefully vague enough to avoid accountability, yet pointed enough to direct scrutiny my way. But then, unexpectedly, support emerged from unlikely places. My Aunt Martha, Mom's more rebellious sister, called me out of the blue. "No small talk," she said. "Your mom's telling everyone you tossed them onto the street." Told her that's a load of crap. I braced for judgment. Instead, she continued, "I remember how they treated you when you lost your job. I wanted to reach out, but your mother insisted you needed space. I regret staying silent. I should have known better." That one conversation chipped away at the narrative that had painted me as unreasonable, to open the door for others. A few days later, my cousin Edward reached out too. "I'm not picking sides," he began cautiously, "but I know there's more to this than what Uncle Richard is saying. If you ever feel like talking, I'm around." Those words, small, simple validated something I hadn't realized I needed to be believed. To have my pain acknowledged, without question or spin. Meanwhile, the family I had chosen rallied around me. Nathan showed up nearly every night. Sometimes with dinner, other times with nothing but his presence, offering quiet companionship and calm strength. Stephanie brought pints of ice cream and stacks of DVDs, declaring mandatory laughter sessions. Marcus checked in daily, ensuring the family fallout wasn't impacting my workload and offering flexibility if I needed time. 2 weeks after the confrontation, they all gathered at my house for what Stephanie dubbed a chosen family celebration. Around my modest dining table, the one my mother had declared too small for real family gatherings, we shared food, laughter, and solidarity. Nathan raised his glass. "To Olivia," he said, locking eyes with me, "for showing us what real bravery looks like. Facing strangers is easy. Facing your own blood, that's something else entirely." Marcus chimed in with a grin, "Which is why I'm making it official. I want you to join Horizon as a partner. Your dedication has driven this company forward, and it's time that's reflected in your title and paycheck." I nearly dropped my wine glass. "Wait, seriously?" "Dead serious," he confirmed. "We'll go over the details next week. But I wanted you to hear it high among people who value you." Stephanie clapped. "Which brings me to my next brilliant idea. Vacation. It's just us. I've been scouting beach houses with room for 4. As I looked around at their faces, kind, supportive, loving, I felt the contrast like sunlight against shadow. My birth family had viewed me as an asset, a convenience, a fallback plan. My chosen family saw me as a human being, one deserving of joy, recognition, and rest. Over the next few months, I rebuilt on firmer ground. I reconnected selectively with those who had shown empathy. Aunt Martha and I started meeting monthly. For lunch, slowly developing a relationship based on honesty and warmth. Cousin Edward and I kept in touch occasionally, exchanging light messages and jokes. I maintained minimal contact with my parents, strictly structured to stay connected to Emma and Jacob children, who hadn't asked to be caught in the crossfire. Michael, however, remained hostile. He refused to speak to me unless I offered an apology, an invitation for his family to move in. And when I held my boundaries, he declared I no longer existed to him. The sting of those words didn't cut as deeply, as I feared. The man who had turned his back on me when I was sleeping in my car had shown his true nature once again. I didn't need another lesson. In therapy, I began exploring the deeper layers of pain, the generational patterns that led us to this point, the unspoken rules I had broken by saying no. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't unraveling. I was rebuilding with truth, intention, and people who chose me without conditions. In your family, support only flowed one way. My therapist pointed out during one especially revealing session, they expected endless giving from you, but offered nothing in return. That's not mutual care. That's exploitation. We spent many sessions dissecting the contrast between forgiveness and healthy limits. You can let go of resentment, she explained, without granting the offenders another opportunity to repeat their harm. Forgiveness is for your healing, not an invitation for further abuse. That clarity began to quiet the persistent guilt I sometimes felt about closing the door on my parents and siblings. The voice in my head that whispered, but their family became quieter with each new understanding of what genuine familial love is supposed to look like. As the emotional storm began to subside, I turned my focus inward. Ward, my house, the sanctuary I had built from nothing, wasn't just a structure. 'Twas the embodiment of my tenacity, the evidence of my will to survive and flourish despite being left behind with renewed conviction. I began redecorating, this time completely, uninhibited by anyone else's preferences. I painted the guest room in a vibrant teal hue one I knew my mother would have loathed. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves went up in the living room, showcasing my proudest reads. Even though my father had always scoffed at cluttered intellectualism, every decision was deliberate. Every adjustment, a declaration. This space is mine. I earned every inch. I deserve it. The most symbolic change came unexpectedly, 3 months after everything unraveled. While filling out paperwork for a routine outpatient procedure, I reached the section asking for an emergency contact. I paused. Listed there in faded ink was my father's name, the same man who once dismissed my desperate cry for help with a cold-hearted lecture. Without a second thought, I took out my pen and drew a firm line through his name. In its place, I wrote, Nathan Taylor, Stephanie Chin, Marcus Johnson. Each name came with full contact details. The receptionist glanced up, slightly surprised. Most people only list one emergency contact, she noted curiously. I smiled, feeling no need to explain. I'm lucky, I said simply. I have a whole family I can depend on. On the drive home, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me here. 3 years earlier, I'd been cast aside by the very people who were supposed to catch me when I fell. Pain of that rejection had once felt unbearable, like an internal injury I'd never stopped nursing. But through that devastation, had unearthed something powerful, something life-altering. Family isn't defined by lineage or last names. It's forged through love, respect, consistency. It's about the ones who stand beside you when you have nothing, who applaud your wins and help shoulder your losses. It's about who shows up not just in celebration, but in crisis. The home I now lived in, the one I nearly lost faith, building stood as a monument to that truth. It was more than bricks and timber. It was my proof. It's my declaration of freedom, of healing, of rising. The girl they had left behind at her lowest had needed their approval, their presence, their affection. The woman I had become needed none of it. That transformation was the truest triumph now. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to create difficult boundaries with relatives who took advantage of your kindness or presence? What gave you the strength to stand firm in the face of pressure or guilt? Share your experiences in the comments. Below, we grow stronger together through honesty and support. If this story struck a chord, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I share real-life stories about boundaries, betrayal, and healing stories that just might remind you of your own. And if you know someone struggling with toxic family expectations, share this with them. Sometimes the family we build ourselves is far more meaningful than the one we were born into. Thank you for being part of my story, and may your path forward be paved with clarity, courage, and love.